So microfluidics, initially when it started in the 1980s, it was just merely a technique. It was considered as a tool of analytical chemistry. But over the last decades, it's really expanded to many, many fields, and it continues to do so. Even in the recent 5 years, with the emergence of new fields, fluidics expanded its applications into those as well. And therefore, now it is a $22 billion industry, which major driven by medicine, by technology, as well as electronics cooling system that we'll cover today. There's some research that says that in 2033, it will reach over 100 billion. So the number of applications is really expanding to niche topics. One of them is electronics with microfluidics for sustainable cooling. It's really in the recent 5 years or so. The concept is of co-designing microfluidics and electronics. So it's more on the fabrication part. It's very new, but has great prospects. And we'll now look into one really major paper that came out on this topic. Idea here is to embed manufacturing of IC, integrated circuits, or electronic components, with the cooling of the device. The major difficulty in expanding of the AI chips, now with integrated circuits, is that they consume a lot of power, but they also generate, and the cooling system usually is embedded as separate system to cool off this heat. Otherwise, if the heat is maintained, the performance levels go down of chips. Here, the idea is that they emulate the cooling system using microfluidic channels by sending some coolant. So whether it's a water or some kind of other coolant through the chip. But the other side of the chip is actual electronic component. So here we have picture of the co-designed device, the top and bottom, with the manifold microfluidic channel. The top side shows the electronic structure here, whatever electronic structure they could develop. By this time, in a couple of years, there's been several already reported. Here on the right-hand side, we have the illustration of the fluid flow through this microchannel. That's kind of considered a part of this electronic component. The blue lines indicate the cold entering the chip, and then they cool off the chip, and then they move out. So let's look more deeply to this system. So here on picture A, we have a cross-sectional view of this device, whatever device. Right now, there is no device here. So this is a cross-sectional view. And then basically in the bottom part, this coolant, in this case, in this paper, Nature paper, seminal paper, I would say, reported water that was used as coolant. In the B, we have a top part picture where there are contacts in copper, metal contacts. And then in the bottom part looks like this, where you can see these trenches where the coolant passes through. Then that's the concept. They take and they try it on making AC-DC converter on this structure. On picture A, we see the side view, so the silicon, some channels underneath. And on top, they fabricated AC-DC converter. So 4-bridge, AC to DC. So 4-bridge rectifier, maybe you remember, yeah? Where you have 4 diodes. The left-hand side, the input function is your AC signal. Then what does the diode do? It cuts off the top part, right, of the signal. Then you have additional capacitor here that can be called smoothing capacitor. Out of these kind of waves, it smooths out. So instead of these waves, you have direct current, direct signal. So these 4 Schottky diodes were embedded on top, and then they tested it basically. Actually, there is a figure here. So the AC-DC will have the AC signal, and then the output is the DC, the blue color here. Whole thing was mounted on top of the PCB to test. And then they ran different tests. And they, for example, on picture G, we can see that if there was a fan, like generally you use fan to cool the system. In your computers, you have fan to cool off the air. So that's air-cooled way. But the liquid-cooled way, in general, it's better. But in this case, they report really, really high, very efficient system where the system was cooled much, much better. So this is really like, after this, I think it opens a new trajectory for electronics-based microfluidic devices, where we're not using microfluidics for ease of access or anything, but we're really using microfluidics for really improving and solving a very pressing problem. Why? Because in the recent year, with the creation of ChatGPT, AI chips, the power consumption has skyrocketed. It will be on the rise even more. You know how fast AI is developing. So use of AI and also integration of robotics will make this issue even more pressing. That's one. The second thing is that from the semiconductor manufacturing, microfabrication lectures, you know that every year everything is trying to get smaller and smaller. We're trying to fit more transistors into a certain surface due to Moore's law. We're trying to make things smaller to increase the efficiency, but making things smaller sometimes leads to high power consumption, and the cooling system, if it's embedded like this in the chip, and in silicon chip in this case, not microfluidic chip, then we could really expand this field further on and solve this pressing problem. So that's on the electronic components. I touched upon the AI chip. If we can cool off the electronic integrated circuit silicon devices, can we also include it into robot cooling? Turns out yes, and microfluidics is being embedded because it can mimic the actual cooling system. In the human body, we have blood vessels, and in the human body, there is already embedded system. So the development of AI chips has ushered in a new era of humanoid robots. You know that it's expected that robots will take over household activities in the next 20 years. Even nowadays in commercial industries, the robots that clean certain household items are already available. I don't know the exact price, but what I heard, it was like one robot costs about $20,000. But with the growth of technology, the price will go down definitely, and maybe in the next 20 years, we'll be able to delegate everything. So including microfluidics field also, where anything that needs human manipulation will be minimized. So current thermal management configurations in humanoid robots focus on cooling motors and power supplies, because those are the biggest components, often neglecting the heat dissipation needs of power-intensive processor chips, which can reach out to 700 watts. That's a lot of power consumption. Microfluidic cooling system in this work specifically was inspired by the human blood circulatory system. So artificial skin blocks heat from the chip, flexible microflow cooling module, and deformation caused by activity. That's an additional strain to heat secretion, because not only the motors and power supplies and components exert heat, but also movement, so mechanical energy would also dissipate the heat that needs to be cooled off, and deformation as well. So the embedding microfluidic cooling system within the flexible substrates improves heat dissipation during stretching and bending movement. So this work specifically focused only on stretching and bending of joints and other parts of robot, not cooling off these bigger components in the robot. Let's have a look how the cooling system works specifically. So here we have a substrate, then we have a microchannel system, and this substrate bends, which dissipates some heat. Then the coolant goes, it reaches the joint or the surface, and whatever has overflown, so the coolant takes away the heat. So that's how the structure is for robots. And then this is a sample device. So you see the white tubes are for coolants. Yes, there needs to be additional component to have a reservoir and the coolant, but it's looking at the big system. Is it fair to have a separate, like a fan or another type? So it's all in terms of trade-off. Yet in some cases it could be more bulky and can create additional movement impedance. But if it cools off the system on a large scale much better than the existing ones, then it's a better alternative. Always it's a trade-off. So here, let's have a look. So on the top side, we see the IR camera that's showing the heat dissipation here in the cube. And you see that the parts that bend, they start heating up. They start exerting a different color, red color, which shows that there's higher heat. Another work, they tested it on actual bigger robot on the other parts. So the cooling system starts working overall and allows the circulation of the coolant. So that's why you can see that the tubes are lighting up as well, because they are carrying the heat away. And the specific joints and these parts of robots, they start cooling down. Even though it's microfluidic channels embedded, we have to also think of this peripheраlia, so additional hydraulic system, tubing system that needs to accommodate the whole process. But the core is to have this microchannel embedded with the chips. Okay, so we covered the emergence of the microfluidic embedded cooling devices, where in general, a traditional way is to have separate system and then have them united. But these are the examples of actually having them together. Besides that, there's also another interesting field. It's digital microfluidics. It's been around a bit longer. And the idea is that it is emerging liquid handling technology where microfluidics plays a major role. So that manipulates liquids in droplets in integrated microfluidic devices. Simplifies the complex chip structure of traditional microfluidic devices, enables precise control, and so on. So the core idea is to manipulate individual droplets on a flat electrode surface instead of having pumps and so on. But we'll cover why we need it. And the major idea is based on electrowetting on dielectric. So that's the process called electrowetting, where you have the voltage changes, and due to voltage change, droplet contact angle changes, and we can manipulate it. But I'll cover it in the next slide. There are many applications, and the applications are now expanding, major in bio-related fields. So why we would go digital? Because no fixed channel geometry needed. You can reprogram the substrate sequence and then basically lead the droplet the way you want to. Low sample volume, down to 100 picoliter volumes they can go. No external pumping needed. So that's a major advantage, because you don't need the actual external forces to push the fluid through certain geometry. Parallelism, you can do several assays, several tests together at the same time. Contamination control, each droplet is isolated, no cross-contamination. So, but before I show some actual applications, let's have a look how it works. The idea is you have an electrode surface first, which is covered with dielectric layer. And this layer, actually the surface has to be hydrophobic. Why do you think we need hydrophobic surface? Yeah, so we have a droplet. So the higher the theta I mentioned in the droplet microfluidics lecture, this theta is called contact angle. So this contact angle have to be more than 90 for the surface to be considered as hydrophobic. And then we have voltage applied on these electrodes. Without the voltage, when the V equals to 0, pictures B, C, we have a perfect shape droplet. But this substrate, as you see, there's slots. When the neighboring slot is applied with higher voltage V more than 0, what happens? It starts pulling the droplet. So there's this force that will be exerted to move the droplet in certain direction where the voltage is higher. So droplet sits on electrode, voltage applied to adjacent electrode, contact angle changes, and droplet moves toward activated electrode. So that's the main principle. The applications are expanding. In general, it's used for manipulating liquid, so to move, to make split, to merge, mix, dispense, and so on. Everything that the person does by hand. If we do it by hand or by other bigger vessels, they're not precise. It's very hard to move droplet. If you do one by one, maybe, but it takes a lot of time and not precise. But this is a good way of doing all these manipulations on one board. So that's the physics behind it. And the physics is controlled by Young-Lippmann equation, where the theta, as I said, it's the contact angle. So contact angle, the major addition comes from the right-hand side of this equation, where we have epsilon permittivity and relative permittivity times V squared, so voltage. So if you change voltage just a little bit, it's V squared. So it will give you a high difference in the contact angle theta. V, because it's squared also, it doesn't matter if you do plus voltage or minus voltage, it will be positive always. And then divided by 2 gamma D. This is surface tension, we already know that. And the D is the dielectric layer thickness. So dielectric layer thickness, if you use like Teflon, a very hydrophobic surface, the theta, the contact angle, is typically 110 degrees. But if we use a really high hydrophobic surface, then this will be large. The denominator will be big, leading to the smaller numerator in this case. But if you make it very thin, the dielectric layer, then there may be some mechanical damages, and there may not be good contact between the droplet and the surface. How about the gamma? The surface tension in general for biosamples, surface tension is low in general. If we have it lower, it's better for electrowetting. So this is an example of if we have a droplet, by having these electrodes, by turning them on, we can split the droplet to 2, we can move them to the left, to the right, and up, down, and so on. So the generation process of droplets on stripped electrode here, the droplet is divided into 4 sub-droplets of comparable size. So there are many manipulations that could be made. So let's have a look at some of the examples. So here it's an electrowetting droplet operation, and that will do several techniques in one. So here it's dispense, just move. Transport, now move to the left. Dispense again. Now we split, and then we merge back. Okay, so that's how it works. Another similar So here, dispense, move, mix, and split. Initially, we put different colored solutions. Let's say we need to mix certain solutions very, very precisely and split them in many thousands of droplets, yeah? Let's say that would be the case if you have to mix several things. And now some of them split, merged together, and then they went to opposite chambers. And there are a lot of already available, commercially available products, but in major why the droplet microfluidics is used is for diagnostics, point of care, where you need to manipulate small volumes of samples. But nowadays it's still hard to go down to 100 microliter to have accurate diagnostics. So a lot of funding is going to actually miniaturizing the sample sizes. So the diagnostic point of care testing. So point of care, anything that has something to do with diagnosing sample, blood, or any kind of liquid, the human body liquid. Genomics. Genome sequencing, this requires a lot of biological steps, cell-based assays, so cell culture, single cell analysis. Sometimes we have to manipulate with one single cell. Let's say you have cocktail of cells and you need to find a cancer cell among them, for example, in diagnostics. And sometimes these separation techniques are used to find this one single cell and do single cell analysis. Synthetic biology, drug discovery, as we covered many times, surveillance as well, where environmental monitoring and food safety. Again, if you need to manipulate with certain unknown contaminant in a food sample, let's say, you have to find it among many and do these techniques on it in uniform way, then that's also an application of droplet microfluidics. And here I have just commercial company, Cybot, where they actually sell it now already. So this is how it looks like, the electrowetting plate. And notice you don't need actual pumps, and the sample needs to be inputted anyway. That's how basically it works. But the idea is same. They are doing whatever we saw in the previous. Splitting, merging, moving. They will have merging, mixing, all together. So now we covered some far out research of microfluidics, and as I said, the list is expanding, and it's also these products are driving that market revenue that we covered in the first part. Another far out research that you will listen to is the oil recovery, and it's more applicable to Kazakhstan industry. These ones, we don't have these companies in Kazakhstan yet, but what we have in Kazakhstan in terms of manufacturing is oil, right? And that's a major GDP source for our country. That will be the last topic for the